Okay, a lot of people that I know are day drinking when they didn't before, and they're making allowances for it. Be gentle and accepting of yourself and others in these hard times, okay? Elsewhere, you're seeing a shift away from caution and community to focus on individual freedoms, okay? Is that somebody talking in the background? Okay, now the worry here with this one is when you've been told that you have something wrong with you, you will make allowances for yourself. Anybody who's ever lost somebody and has been mourning, you know that people will allow you to do things that would usually be deviant. Drinking, smoking, all of these different things. You tell a population that they're traumatized. I wonder how that will contribute to the spiral in drinking and so on and so forth. And finally, we have radical contestation. So the nature and source of the issue is questioned and doubt is sown. So we have the 5G conspiracy. The issue is not as serious as we've been led to believe. This is an opportunity for reform or revolution. Things can't go back to the way that they were before. Okay, so what this has is people start to question the authorities who are giving them this knowledge of what's going on because they've been listening long enough and things don't seem to be getting better. And even if things are getting better, the authorities are simultaneously telling them, no, but things will also get worse. Okay, so I'm going to close that and bring it just back to my face. Oh, there's here are references if anybody would like them afterwards. So you're probably wondering how this all ties together with precarity. So there are 3 things to keep in mind. The first thing is these experiences that people are having, the narrowing of horizons has been discussed in literature. It's just not been pandemic or social isolation literature. It's been trauma literature. It's been precarity literature, okay? If you look in this literature, it is amazing because it seems as though they're talking about the virus. It seems as though they're talking about the issues that people are going through at the moment with losing their jobs, okay? There's gold in those mountains for anybody who has the intellectual pickaxe for it. That's the first thing. The second thing is there is a great temptation when everybody is encouraged to comment to focus on a specific thing, their area of expertise. This can lead to a myopia, which I think is actually a bit of an issue. A government could do abominably in preparing for a pandemic that we all knew were coming. But then in the last few weeks, they get their act together and do very, very well. Okay, which of those factors will make it more likely that the government is going to get in again? Okay, people look at the death toll that will come directly from the virus, but they won't focus on the death toll that will come from a depression, or they won't focus on the death toll that can come from less organ donors because there's less car crashes on the streets. Preposterous things which you wouldn't usually think are related. The issue with all of us focusing on this one specific thing is that what we need is a systems view. Focusing on the single thing is going to mean that a lot will be left in the periphery, okay? This is what the IBI is hoping to get people to pay attention to. It would be a great shame if we all train our eye on just the dot on the wall and ask if it's moving. And the third and final thing is when we are discussing this in terms of senior citizens, as with chorus, or in terms of students, as with my undergraduate students, it's really worth keeping in mind that this underlying narrative, this underlying discussion that we could all have from it, is not just prescient and relevant, but it's a matter of, irrespective of whether or not something is the case, treating it very, very seriously makes it a serious matter, and it will snowball and make people think a bit more. Now, I am not trying to give advice, so I am seeing 75-year-olds day drinking. I am seeing students not participating because they're claiming to be so stressed, okay? And I've contributed, and I think that we all have contributed. I'm not saying that we should keep calm and carry on, but I do know that cultural trauma is a matter of consensus. It's a matter of narrative weaving. We can be responsible while simultaneously not setting ourselves up in such a way. There will be people who will say, we can respond to this by treating it as seriously as possible. There's a number of different ways to be serious. It can point in different directions, and systems thinking can be a very, very valuable thing to avoid the precariatized mind and monomyopia that will only do us harm. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you found it interesting.
Okay. Yes, thank you, Christian. We will open this up for questions now. The way we usually do this is that if you can click on the participants tab at the bottom, and then all the list of names will come up on the right panel on the side, and you should have a button there of raise hand, which will give a little blue hand on your screen. And that way we can get to everybody's questions, because the group's a little bit large to just speak up. All right, we have Anne. Do you want to go first? Just unmute yourself and you can ask your question.
Sorry, is it Anne Lawless?
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks, Dorinda. No, thank you, Christian, for that. I think the brilliance of your scholarship is really showing in your presentation. And I was thrilled by every sentence you uttered. So thank you very much for your presentation. There are probably about 4 or 5 points, if we were able to have coffee and cake together, I would suggest that we chat about. But one of the things I'm working on at the moment is I mentor PhD students. And one of the people I'm mentoring, we've been talking with each other about the significance of being working class academics and the impact of being a working class academic and precarity. That is where, through our conversations, we're trying to conduct a sort of class analysis of the academy. And I was wondering if that's something you would like to converse about at some time. The other thing that, the other major point that really struck me about what you were talking about is the wisdom of our Indigenous communities. They did a very, very rapid response to COVID-19 threats and called elders back to their home communities and to the homelands very quickly. And that has been not acknowledged in mainstream public health, but they are now isolating and isolated. Also having trouble, just as we are, with actual social distancing. But there's been a lot of, I think, reflection and conversation and wisdom coming out through Indigenous health networks about some of the issues that you've raised. So I'll stop there, but again, I just want to thank you. I thought it was a beautiful presentation and I want to thank you for your words.
Thank you very much, Anne. I am so relieved you were the first person to speak, because that's, you just put me on a high. Thank you very much. Yeah, I would love to do that. I'm perfectly happy to send you any literature that I found useful while doing my PhD, because I did do a class analysis of the academy, and I would love to sit down and have a social distancing appropriate coffee, most definitely.
I look forward to that. Let's do it.
On the Indigenous point, you might like this. There's a elder who's affiliated with the IBI, and she said something which I had never considered, which was, she said we've been colonized by the virus, and I thought that was hyperbole, and she was like, no, but when I say colonized, this is what I mean. I mean, you have to change your life. It's come from outside. It doesn't change, you change. And it's an analogy, but she was really serious about it. And the more that I think about it, it's like, yeah, would have never occurred to me, but thank you so much. It's what a great insight. So I'm hearing what you're saying.
Just very quickly, so we can tag off that thread of conversation. I don't want to dominate it because I know we don't have a lot of time, but there's been some lovely conversations going on in among Indigenous activists about what's called transgenerational trauma. That is that trauma is acquired and is passed in cultural ways across generations. And there's been a lot of wisdom and a lot of research done, and it's been going on for some decades, almost unknown to most white researchers and white sociologists, unless they're interested in transcultural work about the nature of trauma and how it travels across and through cultures and generations. So that might be something else to add to our future conversations.
Be an interesting thing to, like, you know, however many years down the track also to track. Okay, we have Sam now. Sam Hunt.
Hi, thanks, Chris. Just wanted to ask a specific question about, you know, you were talking about cultural trauma perhaps as a kind of medicalization. And I wonder if you wanted to say a bit more about the specific kind of medicalization the term trauma often entails, which is the kind of psychological discourse that oftentimes foregrounds our understandings of trauma. And I'm thinking about this in relation to your drawing on Jeff Alexander's work, because of course, Alexander is always kind of interested in repair. He calls it civil repair, right? And I wonder how much of that is also kind of rooted in the recognition of trauma. And I say all this because, of course, both medicine and psychology specifically offer us kind of ways of understanding trauma. And to speak to Anne's point, there are ways in which trauma may or may not be translated in certain ways. And I wondered whether you wanted to speak about that, the kind of the symbolic kind of frameworks that we use to address, express, and understand trauma.
Thank you very much, Sam. So I had two questions there, so I'll take them in turn. So the first one is on medicalization. The concern with it is when you give somebody a diagnosis or you describe their behavior in terms of a particular ailment, it's never just a single thing. It comes with a raft of things. So if you tell somebody, here's an example, when Asperger's started to become really, really well known, I remember my mum saying, I think that my boyfriend is Asperger's because he never listens to me. I say that jokingly, but she was serious about it. You know, she was seriously thinking about diagnosing this man because he wouldn't listen to her in conversation. Similar with trauma. If people start taking seriously the idea that they are traumatized, then they will be framing it in terms of, well, I need to be talking about it more, potentially, or no wonder I want to drink, I'm traumatized, right? There are particular moral allowances that come from being seen as, if I'm going to use one word which I probably shouldn't, as sick or in need of help. So that's the first thing. So when I say medicalization, I mean describing an experience in medical terms can have consequences. That's the first part. The second part is, yeah, I think it's actually really useful to talk about it in terms of trauma as it exists in the imagination of the everyday person, because it seems to me that this concept creep has been happening. Like with the International Basin Institute, we're saying, oh God, what if we talk about somebody and they're dealing with trauma? It used to be an arm gets blown off and you've got physical trauma. And then Freud, and slightly before him, it's like, okay, well, something happened to you in your youth, and now you're dealing with trauma. Whereas now it's everybody is just walking repositories of trauma. You know, it's like whether you know it or not. So I think if you embrace that concept creep, what you actually get is a more communicative population. Because how do you deal with trauma if not through nodding it out, communicating about it, right? So whether or not people actually are traumatized in a way which could be seen as clinical, the desire to talk about the things that they think have impaired them and upset them, I think can be actually quite constructive, especially because as people do go through the pandemic, they do want to talk about it. And it's the issue that they'll think that they're complaining, and so they won't talk about it. And then maybe from that, you'll actually get real trauma. Does that help with the question, Sam?